Welcome back. One of the topics that comes up so much in my dealing with clients is that I talk to them about the importance of talking to each other about their money. So it's sad to say that very frequently I'll speak to, and not to generalize, but frankly, it's usually the man, and he's usually the one who takes charge of the money. And I always have to kind of push back and say, listen, why don't you invite your wife to the meeting? Let's all talk about the issues together. And he says things to me like, Doug, she doesn't care about it. It's not her thing, right? She's busy with something else. And I really don't accept that. I really think it's so important for couples to communicate about money, not only if they want to be successful in their investing, but in fact, if they want to be successful in their marriage. So I thought of no better person to talk to today than Aleeza Ben Shalom, who you've probably heard of for the Netflix series Jewish Matchmaking and her phenomenal podcast, Matchmaker, which is a great name. She's helped hundreds of couples get married. I think that's fantastic. And she's training Jewish matchmakers as well. So who better to talk to us a little bit about money and love than Aleeza? Aleeza, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's talk about these hundreds of couples you've put together. How often in your dealing and coaching these couples would you say that financial concerns come up and maybe cause some problems?
I would say even before I get to a first date, they come up and they cause problems, and I can't even get them to a first date sometimes because financially people are looking at that before even personality, character traits, and who somebody is. But it comes up all the time. It's an extremely common issue.
So let's narrow that down. What actually comes up? What's the problem that people are worried about, or what's the good thing they're looking for?
The problem that comes up is do I want financial security? So do they have money? Do they have a plan of how they're going to get money? How do they spend their money? Or more importantly, do they know how to save their money? And even if you have money, are you a generous human? Because even if you're the wealthiest person in the world, if you're not a generous human, it actually doesn't matter that you have money because it's irrelevant to your partner if you don't have the ability to give, whether it's emotions or finances. So money plays a massive role. It also plays a massive role in divorce because it's one of the top three things that people leave somebody over or because of the stress of money. And then that's a whole other situation
Wow. Wow.
when you have to pull it apart. But even just for example, let's say a couple's going out and things are wonderful, whether it's a first time or second time round or whatever it is, couple, the challenges of even getting to the chuppah and getting married, financially, a lot of times it comes up that there needs to be a financial prenup of some sort. And sometimes that, after all the hard work of getting somebody together, that will be the thing that breaks the deal or that really causes a rift in the relationship. I love you. I love you. I love you too. I trust you. I trust you. You can't have any of my money. Sign that paper. You don't sign, we don't get married.
Right.
And
Right.
everybody's like, what? What do you mean? What? You love me. I love you. I trust you. And they're like, yes. And what's mine is mine. And what's yours is yours. And maybe what we do together, that we could talk about later. But that's how it goes.
So is it when you say financial prenup, just to clarify, are you differentiating between, for example, a halachic prenup and a financial prenup?
Exactly. Yes.
So why don't you clarify the difference and whether you tell people to do both or one?
So a halachic prenup is something that I'm trying to think how many years ago it was that it kind of came into the world and everybody made a
I'll give you a
big
hint. It
deal
was
about
over
it.
15 years ago because that's when I started talking about it.
Okay, because I was trying to think back to when that first started, and it was earlier in my career. So let's say about 15 years ago, there was this awareness that there's a problem for women to get a get, and the way to solve that would be to have a halachic prenup and to have paperwork that puts in place that if this doesn't work and if we go our own ways, you can't just divorce me according to state law or whatever you have to also provide a get simultaneously at the same time. And let's just lay out everything. Like basically, let's figure out how to break up before we decide that we're going to be together and put those things legally in place according to Jewish law.
Right. I always told people the reason I know when it was happening is my wife and I figured that we needed to start talking about it with our kids before they were dating. Because if your kids are dating and they come home and they say, hey, Abba, look, I've got this, I met this great boy, I met this great girl. And you say, by the way, you have to sign a halachic prenuptial agreement because I don't want to have to pay this guy $1 million one day to buy you out of a marriage if it doesn't work out. And then the kid's going to say, "Oh, you hate my boyfriend or my girlfriend." So when our kids were literally like young teens, we said, "By the way, the Goldstein family, all the children sign halachic prenuptial agreements. That's just what we do." And that became the policy in the family. So I always recommend that to people. Start talking about it today, so your kids know that this is something that just everyone does. Anyway, that I, I, I definitely I talk about this all the time, but I want to focus on so many of the cans that you opened up as you started about what couples are struggling with in terms of finances, both when they're dating and when probably early on in their marriage, because everyone comes from such a different background. How do you help people? What do you recommend people do in order to connect financially?
I think that there's something that I would term as financial intimacy. We have emotional intimacy, we have physical intimacy, spiritual intimacy. I would say there's also a financial intimacy, and there are special discussions that we need to have. And I would talk about what's your belief in terms of saving? Do you save? Did you grow up a saver? Did you grow up a spender? Did you grow up an earner? What type of a family environment did you grow up in? So that's the past. Then I would move to the present. What have you been doing? How do you practice and live what you learned, right? Do you buy things? Do you invest in things? Do you save your money and just leave it in the bank? How do you operate today with money? And then a vision for a future. Do you have a goal of buying a home? Do you have a goal of owning a car or renting a car? Or what type of a lifestyle do you want to live? And having these discussions with your partner, I think, is first of all, it opens a can of worms, but I think it's a really great way to see where are we aligned and misaligned, because this is going to come up on a daily basis. Where do we spend our money? For us, I'll tell you personally, we believe in having guests. So we spend our money on Shabbos, we spend our money on holidays. We now have a happy hour, a Friday happy hour. We'll have a pre-Shabbos, bring Shabbos in with a lot of energy. Now it's very late, so we want to have a little barbecue, little snick snack, something to eat so that we're not famished by 9 o'clock. And that's where we want to spend our money. We don't want to spend it going on vacation, and we don't want to spend it, having lavish parties or bar bat mitzvahs. That's for us, that's not our value. Our value is to consistently live by having guests and doing things. And so for us, that was a discussion like where's the money going? What are we doing with it? And what are our goals? And for us, another goal was, yes, we want to buy a home. We want to have a home. We want to have a place and have our makom. For some people, that's not important. They don't care. They'll rent and they would rather have money in the market and they'd rather invest.
So a lot of times you hear people, bizarrely, in fact, you even hear people talk about children, and they say, before or they don't talk about children. They say, "Well, we'll see." And I always think, "Are you kidding?" Right? This is critical, but they say, "Well, it's awkward to discuss." In the same way, what you just described sounds perfect, right? I wish all my clients would talk to each other about money the same way and maybe stay on the same page like that. But I think that people find it, it's awkward. Let's just see. We'll work it out as we go along. And then, they hate each other after a while. Hopefully not. But what are the tools that you can, it's all well and good to say, "Oh, you should talk about it," but not so easy.
I would start with light topics and I would kind of dip your pinky toe in the water. So maybe have a conversation about vacations, right? What type of holiday do you like to take, and how much would you imagine spending on doing something like that? If you understand one person, they never went on vacation. Like a vacation for them was, driving to the local pizza shop, and that was their vacation, right? And somebody else had these lavish vacations where they have an expectation of going away for a week or 10 days and spending, and all the family together, we all come. Those are very different things. So I think I would start with a topic financially that's not overwhelming. Or even, how do you like to spend your fun money? Do you like to go shopping? Do you like to go out to the movies? And other people will tell you, "I don't like to do any of those things. I just like to save. I don't love to spend my money. I like to earn it and I like to keep it, or I like to invest it." I think having basic conversations is a good way to start, or even talking about like how I grew up or how other people spent their money. You don't have to tell anybody's names, right? But you could say, "Well, I watched some so and so and they did like this and I like that. That's a good model."
Mhm.
Or, "I saw this and they were a gambler. They lost everything. And I'm not such a risk taker." I think even talking about how much of a risk taker you are with finances, that will also give you a gauge of how somebody spends, how easily or how difficult it is for them to spend something, and then like have a little baby conversation, see how it goes. You did well, you passed the test. Yay, good. Now you could dig in, go a little bit deeper, have a more intimate conversation.
Yeah, risk is a very amorphous topic. I find a lot of times I'll talk to clients. I'll say, "Well, tell me about your risk profile," and they'll say something like, "Oh, Doug, I'm a very conservative investor." And then I pull out their statement that they've been working with some other advisor for years. I say, do you know 98% of your money is in the stock market? And they go, yeah, but they're all conservative stocks. And I always have to say, there's no such thing as a conservative stock. All stocks can go down. And then, after we discuss and explain it and I show them examples, all of a sudden, like as we say in Hebrew, the asimon nofel, the coin drops. They go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. And this is I had a client, an elderly lady who came in once, and she had no idea. Her husband, of course, had been handling all the money forever, and he passed away. And she was planning next year to move into a senior residence, and this was the money to pay for it. And all this money was in one stock, and it was enough to pay for a senior residence, but it was in one stock. And I said, "Do you understand? This is risky." She goes, "No, my husband only bought conservative investments." So I'm raising this story because when you're saying that people should ask about the other's level of risk, how would you? I would say you have to dig into that a little more. What's the language that normal people should use to discuss this kind of the kind of risks that they like?
I think if we're talking about normal language, I would just get curious about what you are doing or what you would consider to do with the money you had. Like, even if you have a make-believe conversation, let's make believe you have $1 million, I have $1 million. Now, you have 30 days to do something with it. What would you do with it?
It's
And
very
what
nice.
would you expect at the end of a year to happen with that money? So then I can see a person's mind and how they're working and how they're thinking. And if they've learned that dumping it into one conservative stock, right? And for them, that's conservative. And in your mind, you're going, woo, red alarm, red alarm. Like, this is not conservative. This is crazy. Then you'll know. But I think that, first of all, you have to have an amount of financial literacy yourself. Like you're saying, many times men have an idea, they know what to do with the money. They're the ones that have been putting it where it needs to be. And then when a woman is left with that responsibility, she really has no clue. So if you don't have a clue about financial literacy, I think learning yourself before you even have that conversation with somebody else is something really wise to look into.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is, it is a control issue. And even when someone says, especially when people are single and if they're older and they've been managing their own money, whether they're doing it well or not, they've been doing it. And then now there's someone else who comes in and has an opinion on how you manage money. I think that can be very uncomfortable. Someone's coming along and saying, well, I do it this way. Maybe we should do it this way. And now whoever that is taking control out of what is fun. I mean, money really is an identifier, right? People view themselves very much through their own lens of their own money, and they view other people through that as well. How would you suggest someone deal with realizing that, well, now you have a partner?
Well, when we're talking about dating, and I do want to address second time or third time around dating, it's it's a very large topic if we're talking about a financial prenup, because people don't realize the risks that they're taking. Second time marriages have a much higher fail rate, third time marriages even more than a first time marriage. And while we hope and believe that everything's going to be okay, I do personally believe that we need to protect the assets that we have for the children that we already have, or the family, or for ourselves, because that wealth has been built usually over generations, and it's not something that we want to just disappear because we didn't think about these things and then a marriage ends after sometimes 6 months, a year, 2 years. So I just want to throw that in there, that it's especially important for couples who are second and or more times around to have these financial discussions, and definitely to have something in place. But let me go back to your question. Um,
How do you deal with a lack of control? In other words, giving up the control.
I mean, let's just take a woman, for example. If I gave up the control once, I don't necessarily want the control. It's not the thing that I really care about in the world. So I might not care to give it up again, but it would have to be built on trust. There was a couple that was getting married. They were in their 30s, and she had some money saved up. Over the years, she had been working a lot, probably something like over 100,000 or $200,000, not, millions, but that was her life savings. And the man that she married was very controlling, and he said basically like, I run the money and I run the finances. And she came to me and she said, what do you think? And I said, I think that's a red flag, and I think that that's a problem. I think that A, this should be a conversation, and B, if you're getting married, are you choosing? How are you handling money, right? Some people get married, they stick everything together. Some people get married, what I had before and what you had before, it's where it should be, and then we build something together. Um, it ended up being that this was not a marriage that lasted, and it was a good thing that she did keep control of that, or she would have lost it.
Yeah. Yeah, and also there's just a number of cross-cultural issues here as well. Back to the halachic prenuptial agreement. The way I got introduced to it is I met a woman whose parents had passed away and she was inheriting $1 million. We sat and we spoke about it, and anyway, then she left the office, and it was kind of weird. Like I never heard from her again. It was a very strange interaction after that. And then I ran into her a few months later, and I said, "Oh, how you doing? What's going on?" She goes, "Oh, I got divorced." I said, "I'm sorry, it didn't work out." And she said, "Yeah, too bad." I said, "Well, how are you dealing with the investments?" And she said, "Well, I wanted to get my get." I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, my husband said he wants his inheritance." And I told him, "No, it's my inheritance." And he said, "If you want to get, then it's my inheritance." I'd never heard of such a thing before. That's how I
Oh,
first learned about this issue, and that she spent
yes.
$1 million to get out of that marriage. So the issue of what you're describing of maintaining control on the one hand, right, which I'm telling the story, which is going to be scary for people, and they're going to say, Doug Goldstein said you have to keep your money separate. On the other hand, my wife and we got married very young, like we were about 14, it seems. No, I'm kidding. We were in our young 20s, but we combined everything right away. We've always been like, we started with very little, and over the years we've saved and built up something, but we did it together on the one. On the other hand, I see the issue, and I consult with people getting into second marriages or third marriages how to structure their portfolios to protect themselves. I always tell people, listen, if you come to me, you're my client. It means I'm going to watch out for you. I'm not looking at your spouse, right? I'm looking for you. But this is awkward. It's not always nice. And for someone to say, well, I met with a financial guy and he said to do X, Y, and Z. On the one hand, on the other hand, it's good. You blame Doug Goldstein, and then it's all you. Uh, I'll go back to ask you about the language people should use. What's a good way to deal with this without legitimately insulting someone? If you say, I don't actually trust you enough to give you my money, but I'll give you everything else.
I somehow we have to make the language not personal, but impactful, meaning this isn't about you, just in general with relationships. I have a caution, whether I have PTSD from hearing these stories or I have a family member and something has happened. It's just the way of the world, and this is kind of how I was raised, or this is the wise thing to do. Here's something I think we should consider. I would use soft language to have the conversations to bring things up, and then also evaluate again, is somebody a risk taker? Is somebody a spender? Is somebody a saver? How do they handle money? I imagine if somebody was a saver and a low risk taker, even if I was a high risk taker, I might feel more comfortable with a human being like that because I might not feel like they're going to spend the money. And I also might not feel like they're going to take advantage of me because in general, they like to save. They don't, like to spend. But if somebody has a high risk taking desire and they like to experiment and they like to try the newest, latest, greatest stock or whatever's coming out, I might feel extremely anxious. And especially if you want something, and I'll tell you, I heard this growing up, like we want the money to follow the bloodline. Right? So that means grandparents to, let's say, the father down to the children, right?
Right.
Skips the mother. Even if he's not here, the money doesn't go to her. It goes down a generation and it goes to the children because it's generational wealth that they want it to be, even though there's a marriage there. And to me, as somebody who works regularly with singles as a dating coach and a matchmaker, at first it was shocking. Like, are you kidding? Are you kidding? Like we're one soul, but we're not one bank account? How is it possible? Like the neshamot, the souls are connected. But if we're talking about dollars and cents, nah, that's okay.
Right.
But I grew up personally, just like you, like we just melded everything together. I had some investments before we got married because my father, built that, and anything that we got for holidays or bat mitzvahs or whatever, everything went there. And when I started working, he goes, "You should save." And so I just listened and I put money there. So when we got married, the money was there and it basically sat there until we decided to use it as an investment to buy a house. And I didn't add my husband's name because, quite frankly, paperwork is a little bit of a nightmare. That was really the
Apologize
only
on
reason.
behalf of all financial advisors. We have all this paperwork, so
It's like a thing. I had a junior account because that's how it was set up. I got married. My father's name was still on my account. I was 25, but I had a minor's account that was never converted over.
uh-huh.
So, but eventually we just took the money out. We bought a house, and then that was our investment together. But I had a mindset like you had, and everything was melded together. But we also started out with nothing. So I think it's very different when you're young, or young and dumb, as they like to say, and you start out with nothing and you build together versus young and wealthy, which is something that I think is much more common today, whether it's generational wealth or somebody earns a significant amount at a young age, or if it's second time around, or if it's older singles. I think that there's definitely a large difference in how we get into a relationship and how we choose to handle the financial agreements, I'll call it, about our relationship.
Something you said at the beginning, which I thought was very interesting, is you said that if you talk to the person you're dating about his or her charitable goals, you learn a lot about the person. So I find this interesting because, again, it's a topic that I cover a lot. I will tell you very briefly. Many, many, many years ago, I heard Howard Jonas speak. Howard Jonas is a super successful businessman, and he gave a speech. And I remember nothing about the speech except he gets up on stage and among other things, he said that he and his wife give 20% of their earnings to tzedakah, to charity. And I was very inspired by this. And I went home and I said to my wife, let's be like Howard Jonas, right? That's cool. And so we started doing that. And believe it or not, things got better for us over time. And then I began noticing that people who were very successful were people who actually also targeted to give 20% of their earnings to tzedakah. And I like that. And I've been an advocate for this kind of thing, and I think it's important on the one hand. On the other hand, there are perfectly good people who are not necessarily in that space. And I'm worried. I could see if someone's dating or getting into the dating world. I'm sure one of the things you've seen is everyone dating has a list, right? He's got a menu of, well, she's got to have this and that. In fact, I mean, I know this is something that you see, and they tell you everything they want in some impossible person, right? That people want to marry. And if one of them says, yeah, and he's got to be, giving 20% to charity or whatever, because that way I know that he's a giver. How do you put all that together? Because I don't know, is this just one factor and you balance it in, or is there something deeper here?
I definitely think there's something deeper here. There are certain people, and I remember a specific client of mine, it was very hard for him to spend money. And I remember at one point, he wanted to buy something and she wanted to buy something, and they decided they were going to split it. He literally went down to the penny, to the penny. It was like da da da
Wow.
da and 47 cents. And I was like, okay, you just need to know what kind of a human you're getting involved with, which is okay. It's okay to split things. Fair is fair, even, exactly even is even. But it means for the good, it's going to be even like that. You're never going to be cheated. But it means on the other side, the generosity isn't there. So it's it's
Mm.
so hard to, yeah, you could hear I'm like
No, it's
struggling
hard. It's
even
hard. You want someone
to get
generous,
the
but what does
words
that
out.
mean?
Right. So you have to decide or define what generosity means. If somebody aspires to give 20%, but they are regularly giving 10%, great. If somebody aspires to give tzedakah and they want to give 10%, but they haven't given anything, if you have no history of giving, then I have no future hopes of you giving. Even the poorest of person can share a bite of bread. We heard stories like this from the Holocaust, where I have nothing and I still gave you half of my nothing, right?
Right.
And it's really part of a person's identity. And I would say there's different personality types, and there's some people that do have a very me uh, personality type, and it's very hard for them to give. And I do think that generosity and charity is something that is very predictive of what type of a financial human you're dealing with.
Wow. Sorry, you're saying financial, but also beyond. Okay.
Financial and
Right, right.
human.
Another right. Okay. No, I hear. I just think
Yeah.
I hear. Okay, let's
I, I mean, okay, I'll just say this. Generosity plays into, it's not just about money. Do you give time? Do you give advice? Do you give support? Do you give love? Do you give emotions? Do you have availability to somebody else? When I can freely give tzedakah, you will know that they also have other things to give as well. And for people where giving is hard, it's not about the money. It's about the giving. And that means across the board, they will probably be challenged in giving compared to somebody who gives with joy, gives with ease, gives with consistency.
that's right. That is a beautiful and difficult thought. But I don't want to wrap up with that because I want to wrap up. Just we're going long, but I just think you've given a huge amount of great information to people. One of the areas that I just see, and I think you're the expert in, is matchmaking. But now I'm going to narrow down specifically what I mean, which is most of the people I deal with are usually older, and everyone's got a child or a nephew or a niece who he wants to set up, but yeah, it's awkward or they're not going to. And yet I think there's a huge need. What should we do?
I have a philosophy that community matchmaking is the key to bringing couples together. And I think that people should be aware and uninhibited to make a match, even though they might be intimidated. A lot of people are concerned. What will they think of me? Is this all I'm worth? This is who you want to set me up with. And I think a lot of people make a match suggestion that's off the cuff. Ah, this idea popped into my head. They just came over. I just thought of you instantly. That's not a good enough reason to set somebody up. I think a good reason to set somebody up is you both have similar dreams or visions or lives or lifestyles. You both have similar financial habits. You seem to love to spend or save in the same type of a way. I think that you have one, two, or three things in common, and therefore, I think that this is a smart match. Would you be open to going out on a date? And I think that anybody can make a match and that community-wide matchmaking needs to exist. We can't just rest our shoulders on like matchmakers. There aren't enough of us. It's really a very old, ancient, and we're not a large population. Like you'd think, oh, everybody and their mother is a yenta and everybody, you might be a yenta, but you're not doing the matchmaking. You might just be yentaing and talking about it, but you're not necessarily matchmaking. We
Well, you're the first
actually
one I
need
really know, I
people.
got to tell you. So I agree with you. There are not so many. Uh, you're talking about finding similarities. There's the old saying, opposites attract. It sounds like you don't believe
Oh, they might attract. I just don't think that it makes it easy to live together.
that.
So, I mean, imagine opposite financial views. Do you think they're going to get along well? How do you think that
No,
marriage is going to go?
that does not sound right. I hear you.
Right,
Okay. Wow. So it's
right.
important for people to get involved, and I think, based on what you're saying, it's not that you shouldn't or can't. It's that you have to invest a little bit of time to help make these marriages, which certainly in the Jewish world is the core of everything that we're trying to build. Right. It all starts with the home, with the family, which starts with a husband and a wife coming together. And if they don't meet, it's not going to happen. So it's so critical that people do that. Lisa, just tell us, how can people learn more about this, and how can they learn more about what you're doing? Where do they find you?
You can find me at marriagemindedmentor.com. If you Google my name, Aleeza Ben Shalom, Aleeza Ben Shalom, it's phonetically spelled. You'll find all the places to find me. And I'm on social media at Aleeza Ben Shalom as well. You can find my book, Matchmaker. Find
Mhm.
Me a Love That Lasts, wherever you buy books. And if you're in Israel, you can buy it on Amazon. It'll ship over here. And I want to leave you with just one quick story for inspiration for the road. I have a story about the Mahjong mothers who were in their 90s, who were playing mahjong and enjoying a game and schmoozing about their children in their 70s who, unfortunately had divorced and was really looking for a partner. And then they realized, aha, actually, it's not just that we're schmoozing and we're playing mahjong, but we think that they have some things in common. We have things in common. They have things in common. We think they need to meet. And this amazing couple has been dating for over 6 months. And I spoke to the woman and she said it's because of our mahjong mothers. So
Wow.
anyone at any age can make a match.
I love it. That's a fantastic story. Well, I wish that couple success. I wish the Mahjong ladies success in making many more matches. And Aleeza, I hope that you are successful not only in your matchmaking, but in really leveraging it up by teaching. And you've taught over 350 other people the skills, because there really are skills involved. May this grow to 350,000, that more and more people can really help and help not just young people, but couples at any age to really come together and build a bayit in Amman b'Yisrael, a house together in Israel.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks so much for taking the time.